What's the worst date you ever had? Got set up on a blind date once between mutual friends. She shows up to the restaurant already a little tipsy, orders multiple appetizers and only takes like 1 or 2 bites from each one. Then she proceeds to order 3 or 4 more drinks and is visibly drunk at this point. She gets up and says she's going to the bathroom and staggers off. About 15 to 20 minutes go by, so I try to call her several times but no answer. Finally I decide to pay the check and just leave. About 2 hours later I'm sitting at home and I get a call from an unknown number. It's the police department. She was picked up on a DUI on her way home after she ditched me and gave the cops my number to see if I could go bail her out. Met a girl through a dating site and we agreed to meet up for dinner. I learned very quickly that this girl had absolutely no sense of humor whatsoever. I don't even think she cracked a smile the entire night. The date just got more and more painful as the night went on. At one point, we were talking about online dating. She told me about a friend of hers that went out on a first date with a guy online. She said this crazy guy fell absolutely in love with her friend and said he wanted to marry her. So I said, oh, well, I guess I shouldn't have picked up this engagement ring on the way here, then. She just stared at me blankly and said, that's not funny. Yes, it is. Frick you. Well, I gave this answer on a different topic, but it ties in with this. We were out on a date, we had been seeing each other for a while, close to a year maybe. She gets a phone call. Suddenly she looks destroyed. Her fiancé had just died in a motorcycle accident. I was brought up in Poland by Polish parents, university professors, went to a Polish school, Polish university etc. Then I had a date with an American man whose grandmother was Polish. He grilled me on the language and criticized my pronunciation and corrected my grammar. This from a guy whose Polish vocabulary was maybe 100 words. He told me I speak like a peasant. Not necessarily a date, but a person I was dating invited me to his parents' house for the afternoon. He wanted to introduce me to them and show me the house he grew up in. I thought it was super sweet and had no problems going. He was also in the middle of moving and needed to pick up a few things, so it really didn't seem that unusual. Yeah, we got there and it was awful. His entire family was there. They traveled from hours away too. This was not just meeting the parents, it was meeting the entire family. Even worse? At some point, this jackass told his parents that he had proposed. We had been dating 2 months. I spent the entire afternoon dumbfounded and just playing along. We were 2 hours from home and I had no cell service, no way to leave at all. We ended up spending the afternoon brainstorming wedding ideas and planning an Alaskan honeymoon that his parents planned to gift us. His brother even called to say congratulations. We drove back to his apartment in silence. When we got there, I got in my car and left, didn't even bother grabbing my stuff. Weirdest experience ever. I have no idea how he broke it to his parents that we weren't getting married. It was a double date. She was more interested talking to the other girl throughout the whole thing. Found out later from the other guy that his girl cheated on him with my date. Met a girl at a country bar one night in my 20s. We were both pretty drunk but hit it off pretty good. Ended up getting her number and we agreed we'd go on a real date. Fast forward to the date, she gets in my vehicle and she looks almost identical to my mom. I was mortified. I was polite and we went for lunch where I found out she also had a boyfriend she wasn't sure if she was into. Never talked to her again. I smoked a lot of weed at the time and had a date with a girl I met on OkCupid who was 420 friendly. She told me to bring some with me, so we met at a Mexican restaurant at 7:30 and smoked in my car before going in. As soon as we finished the bowl, she was like, oh I forgot, I have work at 8 tonight, bye. So she either went through all that effort to get smoked out one time, or she lemon-lawed me but still wanted to bum a smoke session off me. Either way, I was high as frick and wasn't going to not get some enchiladas, so I went in and got a table for one. Girl I met online claimed to be 24, turned out to be 16. Fortunately I figured it out before anything crazy happened, but man, talk about dodging a bullet. Probably not as bad as some of the others on here, but still makes me cringe 10 plus years later. I was 21 and met a guy at my summer job who was 20. He was a super sweet guy and we got along great when we worked the same shifts together. Eventually he asked me out on a date Saturday night, and I said sure. He said we would go out to dinner, hang out around town, etc. I was really excited because he seemed like a great guy and I never went on many dates. I pull up to his house and he comes out with like 3 other guys. They all jump in my car and I'm like, oh, hello? And they say they want to have a party that night and started directing me around to all the local liquor stores so I could buy alcohol for them. I was a shy, self-conscious girl with low self-esteem and I was always a people pleaser who didn't stand up for myself, so I obliged. I drove these little assholes around town, picking up alcohol for them while they sat in the car, feeling like a complete and utter idiot the whole time. When we got back to my friend's house, and I parked and started taking off my seatbelt, they started laughing at me, like you said you were invited. I was totally non-confrontational so I just said, okay, See you later. They hopped out of my car, took the alcohol with them, and I drove home, totally burning in embarrassment. I had a shift with the guy a few days later and he never even acknowledged it. Neither did I, but our vibe obviously changed dramatically. I never saw him again after that summer. I got catfished. We talked for hours and when it came time to pick her up I clearly saw it wasn't the person I thought I was talking to. I just gunned it and sped off. When I was in college many years ago, before the advancement of cell phones and social media, I was chatting with a girl I met on a BBS who lived on Long Island, New York. I was 18 at the time, but lied and said I was 22 because she said she was 25. We spent a few weeks emailing each other, as well as calling each other. We even exchanged pics. When we finally met up, things blew up. Turns out we both lied about our ages. She was really 33, and lied because she thought she looked younger. She admitted she sent a college photo to me. We still had dinner together, but it was awkward as hell. We never spoke again. Tinder date. She looked nothing like her picture, while not ugly, just completely different. Picked the worst restaurant in town, which I looked past because everyone has different taste. We came back to my house and complained about not showing affection or touching her, so I started touching her and then got mad about wanting a hookup, which I didn't. But the final straw was when she decided she didn't like my house, which I had just bought and was proud of. She immediately wanted to go to Home Depot to buy stuff to start remodeling. It was by far my worst and weirdest date, and I hope she found a house to remodel. Went out with a girl when we were probably 13 or 14. We went to see Inception. She gets up to go to the bathroom, but doesn't come back for a long time. Eventually I go look for her, and the guy behind the concession stand looks at me and gives me the most pitying look I've ever received, and points around the corner, where I found her making out with another guy. I should have walked out, but instead I went back to my seat to watch the rest of the movie. She returned and asked me to fill her in on the last hour of Inception of all the damn movies to miss the middle of. Also, because that wasn't enough, after the movie, I wasn't sure what bus to take home, and she pointed me to the wrong bus. I don't think this was intentional. They were right next to each other, and I wound up in a part of the city I'd never been in before. Got set up on a blind date by some friends several years before my wife and I started dating. The date was early September and we met in a restaurant in the city. It was a nice place, the kind where the waitstaff wear dress shirts, ties, etc. I was in a nice suit and tie. She showed up in jeans, flip-flops, and a hoodie. I jokingly said something along the lines of, "I'm assuming they didn't tell you this place is sort of snooty?" She goes, "They did." I didn't give a frick. I ain't shaving my legs and putting on some fancy dress for some guy who I don't even know if I want to even touch his pee-pee. Let alone if I'm willing to let him between my legs. I just stared at her in disbelief. She then said, "I mean, you seem nice and all, but I ain't in the mood to do all that work when I can just go home and do it myself." I asked her to keep her voice down and she goes, "Why do you want me to keep my voice down? You're afraid people will hear me talking about going home and fricking myself with my vibrator instead of letting you come back and frick me?" I just stood up, walked over to the waiter, paid for the drink I had while waiting, apologized to them for her outbursts and said, "Blind date. I'm not sticking around," and left. I did hear from our mutual friends that she later got married to some guy, stabbed him on their anniversary a few years later, and is now in jail for attempted murder. They were like, "Yeah, we always knew she was kinda crazy. Ya freaking think?" Met her for dinner. We seemed to hit it off well in the first few minutes, until I started feeling the worst pain ever in my side. Turns out I had a kidney stone. I unfortunately had to nope out of that one very quickly. She had blocked me via text when I abruptly left dinner, so she never got the message that I ended up in the hospital. I didn't see her for years until we ran into each other at a bar, me with a different girlfriend, her with her husband. I explained what had happened. She felt pretty bad, but hey, no long-lasting harm done. I bought her and her husband a drink, chatted for a few, and left them to finish their evening together. Had a girl openly flirt with the bartender in front of me. She says she wasn't. But handing him her own phone and asking for his contact info in front of her date seems like it to me. We went to dinner and he started chatting up the waitress. Like interrupting me every time the waitress came over and talking to her for a few minutes instead. After a couple times I just pulled my phone out and started scrolling through Reddit and he complained when he noticed I was on my phone. Cue lecture about my generation. He was like 6 years older than me, Then he got mad when I wouldn't suck his pee-pee in the parking lot. I ended up going back inside the restaurant and calling a friend to pick me up. Dude's car was still sitting there when I left. Frick you, Jason. Went to brewery, date said I had hairy arms and that meant I was horny, said, "You look really awful in this light," and then tried to dig out of that hole by saying in his native language that was a term of endearment long-term couples said to each other. 010 did not date again. Was told we were going to dinner and then shopping. I drove to the town, 1 hour each way, 'cause he didn't have a license. He directed me, didn't know my way around at all, to Burger King. Okay. I'll work with it. Standing in line, a worker accidentally leans on a packet of ranch. It breaks open and shoots at me, right on the front of my nicest shirt. Profound apologizing commences. I ended up paying for dinner too. Then we went to Walmart, where his mom worked, so he could get a discount. Didn't buy anything. Drive home he starts apologizing out of nowhere. I thought it was because of the bad date. Until the smell hits me. He passed gas and I had to legit pull over and roll the windows down a while. In college, I hit it off with a girl and agreed to go on a first date to a school hockey game. When I met her there, I realized I had forgotten my wallet, so I had to borrow $5 from her to pay for my ticket. Not a great start, and I could tell I had dug myself an early hole. Then, once we sat down, we realized that neither of us liked hockey at all. I have no idea why we agreed to meet there, but we were both totally uninterested in the game. So we started talking about other things we were into, and I mentioned that I liked board games. She said, "You sound like my grandma." At that point it was clear that neither of us were into this at all, but it was the first period of a hockey game that she had paid $10 whole for, and neither of us felt right leaving. We sat there and stonily watched the rest of the game. Afterwards, we said, "Let's hang out sometime," and then never messaged each other again. Then, a few semesters later, my friend called me up all excited about a new girl he was dating. He wanted me to come to a get-together at his apartment and meet her. I walk in, and of course he's sitting on the couch with his arm around the very same hockey-hating girl. I immediately grabbed my wallet, handed her $5, and said, "Thank God. I've been looking for you for 2 years." She laughed, and things went all right after that. A guy approached me at a coffee shop and we ended up hitting it off and talking all night. About a week later we had our first real date at my place so I could cook him dinner. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment at the time and the bathroom door was right next to the kitchen. He excused himself before dinner and proceeded to take the loudest, and what I presume to be, the most massive shit this universe has ever seen. The sounds of the toilet carnage still echo in my nightmares. I of course didn't mention that I heard the whole event and we went about our evening. After dinner we got into my bed so we could watch a movie. 30 minutes into it, I needed to use the restroom, so I got out of the bed to reveal that I had unknowingly started my period and left a noticeable pool of blood where I was sitting. He helped me change the sheets. Anyway, we've been married a year now and he still takes the nastiest dumps known to mankind. On one date I showed up at her parents' house to pick her up, thinking we were going for drinks in the neighborhood. She opens up the door wearing sweatpants, trainers and a hoodie as if she just got back from football practice. I was pretty well dressed so she decided to change into something else. She says I can just wait in the living room with her parents. Not that bad, we have some small talk and I expect to be leaving soon anyways. She then shows up wearing the next less than casual outfit and sits down in the living room as well. Saying nothing she just gets on her phone. She's doing nothing but texting whilst I'm left talking with her parents, didn't expect a date with them. At this point I don't know what to expect anymore. Luckily I was able to convince her to go out after a bit and we end up having drinks. All in all she wasn't my type, definitely after that date. I've posted my worst on this question before, so I'll post a runner-up now. Dating at an older age is pretty difficult to begin with. This was when I was about 47, and an acquaintance I hadn't known long said she had the perfect guy for me. He had seen me at a sports event with my acquaintance, and I agreed to meet him for coffee after asking a few questions about what he did. Karate instructor and sports coach, and finding out he was about my age. Showed up on the date, and he had very red eyes. He told me right away he was very stoned. This was before we were a legal state. I'm not anti-weed by any means, but showing up stoned was the first red flag. He informed me he hadn't worked in several years, and his coaching days were 10 years in the past. He had been attempting, in his 40s, to become a pro dirt bike rider, living with friends while he was pursuing his dream, and blaming the industry for his lack of success. I started asking gentle questions just to get the full scope of the train wreck that was before me. He asked if I wanted to go dirt bike riding with him, and I politely declined. The bill came for our coffee and pastries, and he sheepishly said he couldn't afford it but would pay me back on our next date and mentioned he was a good friend of the guy my acquaintance was dating. I asked who the guy was, and immediately recognized the name. The guy had been in the news as he just got out of prison for involuntary manslaughter. I offered to treat with no obligation and gently shut down the idea of another date. I was going to ask my acquaintance, "What the actual frick were you thinking?" But learning who she was dating was a complete answer in itself. Literally shit myself on a date once. Wasn't technically a date, but the guy had a farm. He took me to see the animals, feed, act. I walked away for a few minutes and over-trusted a fart. I just looked at him and asked if he could please take me back to my car. He wanted to know why and I said because I pooped in my pants. Guy had a super nice truck and made me sit on my feet all the way back to my vehicle. We actually ended up dating for 2-ish years, and somehow me shitting myself on the first date was the end of all jokes. I pre-ordered 2 drinks like normal. She shows up, she orders a ton of expensive items and drinks, All the time she is on her phone. I think the bill was around $350 but I already paid my part so I walked out through the back and ghosted. Showed up to a Tinder date where we agreed but she wasn't there. Texted and she said they were around the corner. Come to find her mid-20s divorced socialite, and her friend, mid-40s salesman, had been drinking all day and were proper shit-faced. Proceeded to join them at the table where she proceeded to talk about the married guy at the next table and kept walking by and dropping things so she could bend over in front of him. Then some racist talk and some cocaine use, them not me. And then they decided, mercifully to ditch me because I was no fun. Met a guy at a concert who asked me out to dinner the next weekend. Said we'd go to a restaurant halfway between his place and mine. Gives me the address which I printed out on MapQuest PC. This was before GPS was normal on phones or in cars. I get there and it's an apartment building. Call him to say I think he gave me the wrong address and he said, nope. You're driving. Takes me to an Applebee's because they have the cheapest happy hour he said. We have one drink and he eats potato wedges by himself. When I drove him back, he asked me where my overnight bag was. I said I'm not staying the night and thanks for the beverage. He took my keys out of my ignition and told me to go upstairs. I told him if he doesn't give me my keys back, I will start screaming and call the cops. He threw them in the front seat as he got out telling me I'm missing out on hot tub time. I thankfully never saw him again. He was over an hour late, no text or call, and when he finally showed up, his excuse was, sorry I'm late, my mom had to take a shit. It was with an undertaker's assistant. He'd circle every topic of conversation back to corpses. Me, so, do you know what you're gonna order? Him, well I was thinking the steak, but I had eaten steak when we got the river guy in, and now it makes me feel queasy. I ended up leaving after half an hour. It was like the second or third date and I made her dinner in my apartment. After dinner, I was doing the dishes and I came back out to the living room and she was cutting up lines of cocaine on my coffee table. Go on a dinner date with a guy as a first meet. Conversation is good, we go to his place, I make it clear we will not be having sex, he's fine with it, everything seems good. To preface this next part, I know I'm an attractive woman but I have some damn crooked teeth. The top ones are fine but the bottom are pretty messed up. It's never caused me an issue in dating and most men say they haven't noticed it. I have pretty big lips anyway so they don't show a lot. Anyway, for some reason this man asks me what my biggest insecurity is. I say my teeth. He asks me to smile, I do, he says, wow, yeah, they're pretty fricked up. And that's all. I went home shortly after and never texted him again. Killed my self-esteem for a minute there. I went to a New Year's Eve party with a guy I had been chatting with for months. When we get there his friends asks him where his girlfriend is, and they were not referring to me. I went out for a smoke at that point and he went after, saying she was boring and he was gonna break up with her. I didn't hang out with him for the rest of the night. I guess I should thank him because I hooked up with the party host instead and we've been together for 7 years. He brought his mom. I decided it wasn't going to work out for me. But I stayed. Because. I couldn't miss it. At least I can remember it as funny in some degree. Met her at a bar. She ordered food but didn't eat it since it looked disgusting. It looked fine. So we left to go to a different restaurant and on the walk there, she kept ducking and glancing at the sky like she was being attacked by bats. She hardly said anything over that whole date, it was like pulling teeth to get her to talk about herself. At the second restaurant she took forever ordering and again didn't eat because the food looked disgusting. Emailing about the date afterwards, she admitted that she was high on ice, which I guess is some kind of meth. So I don't have many, because I'd only been swiping for a few months before I met someone, but maybe I'm also naive enough to have some funny things happy already. Like the time I thought the bot I was chatting with was just someone who was super distracted. Anyway, matched with a cute girl, she likes to climb, we have good chat, great. Let's go and do some top rope and hang out. But she doesn't have a car, so I need to pick her up, 30 minutes off route. I'm not thrilled but whatever. Meet her and, well, it's not her. Or it is her from the profile, but maybe from 5 to 8 years and a kid ago? I'm tempted to call it off but I'm too much of a softie, and she says she made cookies. I love cookies. We head off to the small local cliff. We arrive, walk the 10-minute approach, the conversation is still fine but I'm worried now. I resolve to just have a nice time and have some fun, and just learn from the experience. She's perfectly nice but I'm seeing red flags. At the crag she says she borrowed her friend's shoes and isn't sure they'll fit. Same with the harness. Uh-oh. Well they do fit, yay, so I rig the anchor and we start climbing on a nice 5.6, easy, for a warm-up. Except that she can't climb. Fine, okay, whatever. We're still chatting as she works on the off-ground move, and then just bursts into tears. Turns out that it's her sister's dating profile and that's who she borrowed the stuff from, and that her husband doesn't know she's on dating apps. I find all of this out amid tears and so does everyone else there who can overheat it. Some very awkward talk therapy later, I drop her back at her house, Is it her house? Is it her neighbor's house so that hubby doesn't see? And she leaves me the cookies as an apology. And they were store-bought. Set up an internet date. Arrived at the coffee shop and realized the pics were from a long time ago or really misleading. It was annoying, but I'm no 1010. We chatted over a coffee, then opted to get lunch next door. I wasn't getting much of a vibe, but I was hungry. As we're eating and I'm struggling to keep the conversation going, in the window behind me this truck pulls up with 2 dogs in the back. Owner runs off on some errand while the dogs stay put. Mid-bite, these 2 dogs start going at it hard. I mean, the one on top has the other bent over the edge of the truck. They are banging like the next stop is the vet. The entire time they are fricking, they just stare at me. My date looked at them once or twice, awkward laugh, then tried to resume normal first date banner. I couldn't do it. Just paid the tab and bounced. Neither of us messaged afterwards. Dude, last month I went on a date that ended up back at her place. Things get going in the bedroom, but I suddenly hear the pitter-patter of tiny feet. I look at the doorway to see a duck walk into the room, look me directly in the eyes and quack. She says, "Oh, don't mind him, that's Tupac." I started laughing so hard that I couldn't continue. Never spoke again because I laughed at her duck. What was your worst date? Share it below.